Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind. This time, the Wheel of Jobs decided that we play Samurai on a Wednesday evening. And this set is a bit longer than usual, and you can probably guess why. With that said, for duty 1, we start with E9N, Eden's Cloud of Darkness. And it turned out Alexandria knew me. Hello! This is quite an interesting fight, and there are two mechanics I would like to highlight. The first one is the glowy platforms part, which can be a bit scary, but as long as you make sure you change your spot every so often, it'll be fine. Unlike the Savage version, on normal, as long as there isn't a player for too long on the same platform, they won't give out on you. So make sure to get away from platforms with a more purple glow. That's the danger signal. For a job like Samurai with cast times, it can be a good idea to slide over to a more fresh platform before you start a cast if you want to be on the safe side. Later in the fight, take note that the boss may cleave half of the room during this, so you may have to shuffle through a bunch of players to survive. The other mechanic that is worth talking about is the thing that happens in the Obscure Woods phase. 8 circles appear, they then turn into a circle of roots each, and each tether to the closest player, although each will only tether to one player, so you may get tethered to a different one if there is competition. After a moment, the tether turns into a root, and that root is broken by getting away from it. The mistake a lot of players make with this mechanic is running away before the tether turns into the root, which, if you move too much, can actually mean you don't have space to get far enough away. My advice for this mechanic is for melee jobs to choose a cardinal route, as they're within melee range, and ranged jobs should take intercardinal routes instead, exactly because they can still attack from a distance. Help each other. Get real close to the circle AoE, see the root appear, don't do anything, see the tether appear on you, don't do anything, see the root appear on you, now you run. On the subject of something more specific to this run, I tried my best to keep a rigid and strict samurai rotation, but later in the fight I lost a few GCDs here and there and things drifted apart a bit. Overall, I think things went pretty well though. For duty 2, we went to Titan Extreme. In our first attempt here, our dancer died straight up to being too far out on the platform on the first stomp. On the first upheaval knockback, we lose a tank. Later in the fight, we deal with the adds in a rather awkward way, making the safe part of the arena pretty small. One of our tanks also dies, they get locked up a bit with the landslide. In the chaos, both healers get swiped by Mountain Buster, and while we keep trying, Titan has way too much HP remaining for us to brute force from here with no races. For the run back, we talk briefly about the adds needing to die closer to each other, and Chitose suggests letting them main tank. I am a bit worried about this, since eventually a tank switch would be a good idea, but often it doesn't come up as, mandatory, I guess. The first upheaval knockback swipes Istrida off the arena once again. During the Titan Hard phase, nothing significant happens. In fact, every jail has been dealt with incredibly well. The final phase begins, and we have the adds spawn. This time, we give Istrida time to gather them up before attacking, which works better, although Asuna our dancer dies in the explosions that follow, and I dangerously sought shelter from the explosions next to Chitose, but I survive. Shortly after, I get jailed, which is handled nicely. I also help getting the healer free, but upheaval happens right after, taking Istrida, Velkund, and Asuna all at once, and the immediately following landslide takes out Bobby. This looks quite dire, but considering how close Titan is to going down, this is still winnable. However, since Chitose was the main tank, the tank switch vulnerability is up to 4 stacks, so the damage is wild. They managed to perfectly time Living Dead, although it looks like Green also timed their Benediction a frame afterwards. And we wrap up the fight quite nicely. Titan is a surprisingly manageable fight where you can mostly get away with winging it. We also beat it with just 3 players back in Endwalker, link in the description if you're interested. That said, well done by the team. It's not easy. After this, we get a weird kind of break, I guess. For duty 3, we have friendly nightclubs. The best you can do here if you want to optimize as a melee DPS is to consistently target the enemy with the most raw HP so you maximize the damage that connects. Overkill damage is effectively wasted. For the small mobs, just hit whatever has the most full HP bar. Once the Gobu spawns, focus it until it gets real low, and then back to the small guys. For duty 4, we go to Sunshine and Fist, and well, the only real threat here is the eye floating around. Try to lean away from it as it circles around, as it pulses circle AoEs every so often. All the ad packs around the area do the same, so just stay away from them too. In terms of samurai optimization, I decided to set up my speed buff, then my damage buff, and then Higanbana. After that, I just do my only 1-2-3 combo until I have to reapply my speed buff. The fight should not go long enough for you to either need or benefit from reapplying Higanbana, so just do those 1-2-3 combos. Remember, it is a rear positional. For duty 5, we go to Frenemy's house party, and the advice is just the same, although it felt like the whole team was in on the speed optimization this time. And in that case, for an even faster run, tank should just be AoEing and collecting the mobs. Everyone else should try to hit a healthy mob, optimally not the same one, as the tank will finish off the ones that get low very easily. For duty 6, we get over the rubber boots, and it seems like the tank couldn't even muster up to tank stance. Oh well. Quick and easy, 1 minute adventure. Actually, no, it's not even 1 minute, 30-second adventure maybe. For duty 7, we get next to the Aglet. At this point, I really started to pay attention to the names, and a quick review tells me that none of these guild tests had any repeating names. Or maybe I missed something? Still weird. I guess I was just not needed elsewhere. For duty 8, we go to there exists a bucket connected to another bucket. For Samurai here, a good idea is to set up both of your buffs. I recommend getting the speed one first so you can more quickly get the damage buff. After that, if at least 3 mobs overlap, you can use your AoE option. Otherwise, just continuing the single target is probably best. I felt like it was better to rely on single target for most of this. And also, remember, once the boss at the end is engaged, it makes more sense to focus it down over cleaving everything. It is at least a bit more interesting since, as a melee, you should try to lean away from the slugs as they can pacify you. For duty 9, we went to on top of the top hat. And I just want to underline that this wouldn't be nearly as mildly annoying if it wasn't for the simple fact that I sit in queue for over 5 minutes for each of these duties, and it's just this. Very boring is what it is. For duty 10, we went to Bird Up! Dun dun dun! Anyway, I felt like the one of the Bird Up boys here was invulnerable for way longer than usual, but it is not like it changed much. We still killed them all off in the second round. At this point, I decided we had to continue to at least 15 duties, or until something interesting happens. And with that determination, for duty 11, we went to Strayborough Deadwalk, Ghost Park. This was a really fast group, even despite having some minor hat problems on the first boss. But not for me. A thing I didn't think too hard on during pulls was how to make the most of AoE while moving. The way I typically do it as Samurai is just alternating the filler AoEs, and once I have 2 Sen after Fuko, I use Hagakure to make space for more. It's good enough and allows me to keep up with the pack no problem. However, in retrospect, what might be smarter for a bigger burst once a pull destination is reached is to use Tenkagoken the first time you get 2 Sen, hit the mobs you can always Gyoul turn to catch up afterwards. Hold the Tsubame Gaishi, and then once you reach the destination, throw it out there and immediately get to bursting everything else you have. The simple adjustment here is to just use the Tenkagoken to have the extra for the burst moment. I did not do this in this duty though, so that's something to keep in mind for later. On the second boss, we also managed to get hit by 1 Ghost Teapot, but we didn't even see the third one. On the final boss, I accidentally used Jinpu at a time where I should have used Shifu. I realized my error just as the spell queuing set in, so I couldn't even change course. Probably not the best move, but I decided to resolve it by using Hagakure. Right after, our healer messed up and died to the Ghost Duster, but luckily we had a summoner, so this was not a big deal. Samurai is one of those jobs where you might feel a bit stuck if you want to optimize your damage, because using things as you get them feel a bit wasteful since it means you probably won't align them for buffs. Or maybe you will. But it sometimes leads players down a path of holding all their cooldowns for bosses. This is not a good idea, and generally, by using your cooldowns as you have them, you will progress through the AoE pulls much faster, and typically, you will get about the same damage on the bosses just the same. Sometimes, this will cause certain cooldowns to glide apart, but getting as many uses of the cooldowns as you can is almost always more important. So remember, don't sit on your big cooldowns for a rainy day. That rainy day is right now, and it is always now in a dungeon. For duty 12, we went to Alexandria. Something funny I noticed was that the very first pull felt weirdly slow. I wonder if it was just because as Samurai I can pump out my burst buttons a lot faster than certain other jobs. For instance, with Pixomancer, if you actually use everything you have, that pull will end before you make it through everything. In extension of my advice from Duty 11, this starting bit is an interesting example of exactly this. Typically, if you blow everything on the first small pull, you will get some minor cooldowns for the second bigger pull, and then during the fight with the elephant at the end, your bigger cooldowns come up again. This is an avenue for a completely different piece of advice. If you get your big cooldowns up and ready, only use them if you actually get value out of them. For instance, if the elephant will die before you get full value out of like a buff cooldown, it might be better to just hold it. Part of the problem is also to consider that the rest of your party also has the opportunity to slam the gas at this moment. This often leads to the elephant taking quite long. A tip for the first boss. Foreign entity removal, the mechanic with the donuts and cross AoEs, when it overlaps with immune response, it is worth taking note that the first immune response resolves around the same time as the second donut or cross, and the second immune response resolves a moment after the fifth donut or cross. Take your time and focus on each thing as you go. Given how the donuts and crosses typically are distributed, following along as the third and fourth resolve, so you're near the fifth, is not a bad idea. On the second boss, a tip for the disassembly where it produces chasing AoEs is to try and remember that the AoEs are chasing you. You can easily lock yourself out of melee range for a few seconds if you don't think about how you place the AoEs following you. In fact, if you prepare for it in advance, you could bait them so you get more uptime by being far away when the mechanic starts. Right near the end of this fight, I survived by a fraction of HP due to messing up my position. It snuck up on me so much that I even forgot to use Tengetsu. Remember, the line AoEs resolve alongside the triangle half-room cleave. The spread markers take a bit longer, so it is okay for them to overlap at first. On the final boss, I made the mistake of lining up Limit Break at a point where I could probably have done more damage sooner by just using my own cooldowns. Aside from that, a good run with no major mistakes. For Duty 13, we went to Strayborough Deadwalk. Again. And this group was also quick. It got a bit scary on the first boss, but aside from that, whenever I had an opportunity to, I tried my best to make the most of Emboldens from the Red Mage. But, as I mentioned earlier, it can be a bit difficult to have a structured rotation with the stops and starts and chaos of a dungeon. What you can do, though, is hold a Make Shi Sweep for a bit. You can also hold the Tendo Kaishi Setsugeka for a bit, not to mention the Oginamikiri. My point is that you have a few cooldowns that can slide a bit to fit inside a raid buff if you think it will come up in time. You can also hold Showa until you do another Ia Jutsu, and hold Kenki a bit. For Duty 14, we went to Strayborough Deadwalk again. I wonder why this dungeon specifically 3 times. Anyway, the dancer was particularly visible to me in this run, and I of course tried my best to align my burst cooldowns with Devilment as best I could. The dancer themselves also commented on the fact it only took like 13 minutes to clear. Something funny I ran into in this run specifically was that in this run, the White Mage would sometimes drop a Holy on the first pack as we ran past, which of course stuns it. The way it messed with me is that I usually run along the pack, so by the time the pack started moving again, there was a high chance I would have aggro, and simultaneously be way behind my group. I wisened up to this later in the duty, but it was also somewhat inconsistent when the White Mage would do it. Generally, my advice here for White Mages is to not use Holy until the pull reaches its destination. Otherwise, it just confuses the tank and the DPS that the pack is acting weird compared to if it was any other healer job. And additionally, the group just has to stall DPS until the last pack finally arrives, delaying the burst. And finally for Duty 15, we went to M3N, Brute Bomber. Liveri announced that they were a first-timer, and that did seem pretty believable, as they seem to have quite some problems with the fuse mechanic. If you don't realize you need to look at the mobs for that information, that can feel pretty hidden away. Nearing the end of the fight, a particularly easy to mess up mechanical combo is the Fuses of Fury combined with the Lariat combo. The thing that really messes players up here is when the bombs that explode second are covering up the safe side for the Lariat. This catches both me and the Viper off guard and we go down. Fortunately, we're raised back up quickly by both Ad Infinitum and Liveri. This time, I also managed to sneak in the Limit Break just in time so all the damage lands. A very weird, almost topic rail set of duties. First, we have a raid, then an extreme, then 6 skill tests, then 4 expert roulettes, and then a raid again. I wonder, if I had queued again, would I had gotten an extreme trial again? Anyway, I'm glad we didn't just get 20 guild hests this time around. I was slowly considering whether I should check in on Light instead to avoid it, but given it seemed to be entirely new groups each time, I don't know if that would have changed much. We're also only 5 duties away from reaching the round 500, a quarter of the way to the finish. I guess there's still a long way to go. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, at the start of Dawntrail, the Tendo EI Jutsus had a GCD of 3.3 and a slower animation. When this quickly was changed back to 2.5, the animations were sped up. For some reason, it was decided that Tendo Setsugeka specifically was weird, so they changed Tendo Kaishi Setsugeka from being a clone of Tendo Setsugeka to being its own separate final slash.